Welcome to this week's Tech Insight series. This week, we are talking about some really exciting transformation that's happening within the manufacturing space, as well as how it bleeds into other industries. And we've got some great guests. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure that you're going to find something here that's both interesting to you, as well as transforming the industries that we're talking about. So let's introduce our guests. First, I'm Nathan Lesnowski. I'm Concurrency's Chief Technology Officer. I'll be your host today. And we also have with us Brian Hayden, who's a managing architect with Concurrency. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Nathan. Glad to be here again.
Awesome, welcome back. And then also we have Lewin. Lewin is a principal architect with Concurrency. He has a long history on the IoT space, in digital transformation, in manufacturing transformation, and he happens to have an awesome background. So welcome, Lewin.
Thanks, Nate. Hey, Brian.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get going. So things we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about 6 manufacturing scenarios that are relevant for most organizations. We're going to talk about how there's value in each of those scenarios, what the positive gains are, and how they've taken it from a pilot implementation to something that's provided real value. We also want you to be aware of what we're talking about on February 25th. Brian is going to be back, so if you like him today, you're going to like him then. And we're going to be talking about creating digital lines of business. So today's conversation focuses more on the manufacturing ecosystem, supply chain, what's happening inside the warehouse, the way that we're enabling the warehouse with technology. And this next conversation is going to talk about how we translate a lot of these types of features into creating digital lines of business with your customers, taking the core of your business, the core of your mission of your business for your customers, and enabling that with technology to make a digital line of business. So really interesting conversation coming up in our next session as well, so don't miss it. All right, so when we talk about the transformation that's happening in many of our customers, what we're focusing on in this conversation is what's happening in marketplace disruption, what's happening in the transformation of the operational savings of an organization via technology, and looking for ways for us to be able to take the operational entities, the way the supply chain works, the way we deliver new capabilities to our customers through the products in our supply chain, the way our warehouses work, and the way our warehouses deliver products in the most efficient way. We're intending to drive operational savings through those vehicles using technology, and also enable them with new revenue creation opportunities, even through our operational savings. So we're spending a lot of time today talking about the way we disrupt that marketplace by making ourselves more agile, by driving savings within our supply chain, and using platforms like data and AI and apps and product to be able to do so. What we're seeing is that this is one of the key opportunities that exist within 2021 that companies are focusing on. We think about the ways in which companies are looking to transform their businesses, and especially coming out of COVID, to put their businesses in a position where they can respond to the market. It's right here. It's in terms of creating new digital lines of business and delivering operational savings through AI, as well as the relationship to the greater warehouse story. So we'll be talking about many of these types of situations today that may sometimes feel aspirational. They may sometimes feel like something that is a little further out than where your company happens to be. And what I can tell you is a lot of these things are closer than we might think they are. And the value available to ourselves by using these technologies is very clear, it's achievable, and it's something that we can drive that outcome very quickly within an organization. So looking forward to covering those. So there's 6 scenarios that we're going to be talking about today. The first of these scenarios is about how we automate the supply chain. This is about how we take the end-to-end process of receiving an order from your customers and serving that order via a well-integrated supply chain that allows you to optimize the costs of delivering that product to your customers at the right level of service and efficiency, somewhere between I always have material and just in time, in meeting that customer where they're at in terms of where they need competitively that service level to be, while delivering it with the efficiency that causes you not to waste money by keeping inventory on the shelf, but also causes you to be able to buy it at the right times. We're going to talk a little bit about the relationship of this into how we drive that awareness of our supply chain into serving customers that we know are buying less or buying more. We start to gain insight into our customers and be able to have proactive conversations with them versus reactive conversations. We'll talk about driving predictive maintenance through a manufacturing framework that lets us have better awareness of the different elements of our manufacturing process, which of those parts of our manufacturing process are operating optimally, which of them are not, and where the appropriate periods are for us to be able to correct those errors. We'll talk about the relationship between our supply chain and a smart warehouse. How do I organize my warehouse in an appropriate way? Hot lanes, cool lanes, where should my material be? Where shouldn't my material be? And how can I put myself in a position to be able to optimize that? We'll talk about quality management. So looking at products that are coming off our manufacturing process, looking for opportunities to be able to improve the quality of those products, whether it's the product itself, it's a label on the product, it's the speed by which we run it through the process, it's the human part of the process, it's the machine part of the process. So many opportunities for us to ensure that our customers are getting what they're paying for. And then ultimately the relationship between this and making intelligent decisions, how all these projects relate to an appropriate data environment and the relationship of the data environment to serving these use cases. All right, so let's dive into our first scenario. We'll be talking about the supply chain, especially how we align the relationship between inventory and demand. And Brian is going to take this topic. So Brian, let's talk a little bit about this. Help us understand the path that an organization goes through to optimize their supply chain and what technology serves it.
Sure. So, I mean, this is a great ground floor type of discussion when we start talking about the supply chain. And clearly in Wisconsin here, we're heavy manufacturing, and everybody here should know that the supply chain is very complex, and any disruption in those in the sequence of events around the supply chain can be very costly to the business. So what we're looking at here is, sort of a general outline of the different components that we have to consider in the supply chain. What kind of external factors, what estimate of the inventory that we need, and how these different components relate to each other. With the supply chain, the way that we approach this problem is we start to break down each one of these components and build out the data and get the data into a consistent format, and then be able to apply algorithms and models to each one of these steps to find anomalies and also to make accurate predictions for the future. So what I do feel like a good approach for this is, we've done some great work with some of our clients in terms of building out these supply chain models, and you wind up getting into a iterative type of cadence with delivering these types of projects.
Mm-hmm.
At first, you start with, a couple of simple scenarios. We might have to spend a lot of time up front managing the data, and then getting to a point where we're going to validate our hypothesis. Then we take that and we go on to a second iteration, and we improve on that over and over again until you get the value you're looking for.
Where do people usually start in optimizing the supply chain? Is it the inventory? Is it the demand that falls into the inventory? Is it further down the line? Like what's the first problem to be solved, and what do we do with it?
Well, I mean, actually the first problem to be solved is the data. So, the hardest problem, getting the models to perform well in predicting each of these different components. If you look at the demand forecast versus the estimate of your inventory, like each one of those steps, like it's pretty, once you have the data cleaned up and in a useful state where you know that you can rely on that data, then applying the models is the easy part. It's getting the data to getting the data to a consistency where you can trust and validate it. That is the hardest part. So that's where you have to start.
Got it. So pulling in that data and preparing it for us to be able to produce an accurate demand forecast, that then lets us produce an accurate inventory need.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of factors that go into this. I mean, we've done some really incredible projects that have taken, one of our clients has taken their inventory load and shrunk their warehouse distribution by 60–70%, which has opened up a whole bunch of opportunities. The empty warehouse space they can now lease out to other customers and such like that.
Oh, that's a big point. I mean, think about that. Like the not only just the inventory itself, but also the availability now of space that could be used for alternative purposes.
Yeah, exactly. So, you take, if you didn't do these models, you might have, 2 million square feet of, of warehouse that's being 100% capacity. You're running out of space and don't really know where it's going, or where to fill other things. And now you have half your warehouse that's empty, and you find antique cars or something.
There you go. Awesome. So this is a good, the kind of near-term scenario. Most companies have this problem. Very achievable type of output. Talk through how, this slide here I think is really interesting, applying this to customer awareness. Can I help me understand what I'm looking at here?
Yeah, so, if you have your customer base, and we're all collecting data. Think about big data and all these social media networks and how your information is being aggregated from many, many different areas. And so what we're looking at here is looking for customer buying anomalies, and what you see in some of those shaded boxes are customers where our algorithms have detected abnormal buying patterns. And this dashboard would allow you to drill through and take a look at, who is this customer, what kind of anomalies are they having, and what can I do about it to maybe get them back into my purchasing workflow.
Awesome.
So again, this comes back to that data aspect of it, which is, why starting out with the supply chain is a really good, it's a really good first thing to talk about, because it's so much of the data is just getting it aggregated, knowing where to look for it, and then getting it into useful state.
Yeah, you can think about how, if you had the accurate data and you're able to optimize your supply chain, and now you're going back to your customers, understanding who's buying or who you're predicting is buying, this lets you have really very proactive conversations with your customers.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Let's move into the next scenario, which is really related to this, which is warehouse placement. And Lewin, you're going to talk a little bit about this. So it's optimizing the warehouses, both between what warehouses I'm using, and then also what's happening inside of those warehouses.
Correct. Yeah, in this case, right, we're looking at a warehouse optimization. And when we're looking at warehouse optimization, we're looking at it in a couple of different areas, right? We're looking at storage, like Brian talked about. How do we store things, and how do we make sure that we are putting these things in the prioritized areas of, am I putting the heavier loads on the bottom, et cetera, as well as, am I putting the right space, smaller items somewhere else, right? That's one, which also takes us to the next item, right, which is picking. So just because your warehouse doesn't mean that, the items in there are going to release themselves and, sell themselves, right? You have to actually have somebody to go, when the orders come in, to go collect these items and, put them in a box and ship them out. So all of these needs to get taken care of, right? And then obviously, the next part is inventory optimization. Do I have the right items at the right place? And distribution, right, of that particular items. Sometimes you might actually have to reload your, rebalance your warehouses too. Sometimes, you might have a weather system like we're having right now, where, you're looking at New England, that might, area that's going to get bounded by snow ahead of time. So you might want to actually predict some of those things. So some of the data that you're looking at, come from your internal data, which is great. Some might be external as well, right? Some of them might be related to your other external, type of weather or, uncontrollable data. And some of them might be coming from your other associates, right? Other people who are producing as well, and saying, hey, what's your quantity on hand right now? And depending on what your, load might be, I mean, you want to stock up ahead of time, or, relinquish my, my storage space ahead of time as well, depending on where you want to optimize on certain things. This is a fun area to be in, and there are a lot of value to be made here.
So tell me a little bit about what I'm looking at here.
Yeah, this is actually, a few items that we actually worked on, right? One of them is load balancing, in terms of how do I ship something quickly, within a certain time frame. So in one of these items, I'm looking at a number of warehouses, a number of items, and how do I get to a customer on a next day basis? Do I actually rebalance a warehouse? That's one. The other is we actually, created ways to track items within warehouse, not just from crates and placement, but also putting, things like beaconing systems, essentially, GPS within the warehouse, right, to track your movement of personnel and equipment, just to make sure that we can optimize some of these items. On the first part of it, you're looking at inter-warehouse and external related items. On the heat maps items, you're looking at a warehouse and how much certain areas need to be moved around, right? Like, hey, if I'm actually putting, if there is a particular demand for certain items, and we want to push them closer towards the assembly line or packing line. That's one. The other is, with this type of tracking, we can actually look at efficiency as well, right? We can look at a device that somebody's carrying around and say, hey, there are 2 forklifts coming down picking up the same item or similar bucket in the same aisle of a warehouse, and I can reroute a forklift and say, go pick up the next next item first, because there is you only have so much room for one device to come down, right? So we can actually make things a lot more efficient. And with this kind of efficiency, we have seen up to I believe 120 hours per shift being lifted out in certain smaller warehouses. And of course, as it scales up, right, your numbers keep going up higher and higher.
Yeah, I know one of our customers, they pride themselves on having the best people that are performing the manufacturing operations, and this just makes them better, right? It improves their efficiency and puts them in a position where they're having less collision scenarios, less people going after the same parts, less scenarios where they're having to go all the way across the warehouse to go get something where it could have been placed much closer. A lot of opportunities.
Yeah, especially when if people are creature of habit, right? When people order certain items, you want to make sure that those items are there for them to get delivered the next day. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Yeah.
Well, let's move into another related scenario, which is optimizing the quality of products. This is essentially quality analysis. What are we seeing companies doing here, and what kind of output are they getting from it?
We're looking at it a couple of different places, right? We're looking at it from things like quotes and data in terms of readable items, right? For example, we have a client that was looking for materials that are being ordered, right? And sometimes we can actually get efficiency on the orders itself. So, for example, if they send you a document, a printed document that says, hey, I want particular orders of 2x4s or building materials or so on and so forth, somebody has to manually enter these in, right? And we can use things like OCR to actually put those in, but obviously lingo makes a big difference. So natural language processing, that kind of technology comes in to actually decipher these type of language for anybody to be able to process this type of input and get accurate data coming back out. In this case, right, we can turn around, again, efficiency goes up because we are actually getting accurate placements of orders, right? Even handwriting recognition. We can recognize handwritings so that you don't actually make mistakes in terms of, hey, I can tell a customer if a particular item is either back order right away quickly, or I can place the order right from a PDF or any other form, input material. Additionally, right, looking at beyond the, well, if you look at things like OCR, right, everybody's using that for a while. But looking at the next item that I'm putting on show here, what you see is a big brown, a picture with a potential, crack-looking items, right? It's kind of interesting. This is actually inside of a sewer, pipe. We actually wrote a algorithm, right, that allows us to capture the video footages from these inspection runs. And then I can turn around and train these items and train these images in such a way that we can tell you exactly where a crack is on a sewer pipe, right? Imagine that scenario. This is, in this case, a very grainy picture, and I can still get a good percentage of accuracy on a number of different scenarios. I can tell you severity of this particular crack. I can tell you the type of crack it is, whether it is horizontal crack or a stress fracture, and so on and so forth, right? In this particular case, we're looking at increase in value, right, in terms of somebody physically watching the videos, versus let AI do the job, and then increase the productivity and accuracy, because people do get tired at the end of the day.
You're taking someone that's an intelligent person who's intelligent in this particular space, and you're optimizing their ability to apply their knowledge, right? Like versus
Yeah,
like keep looking for 8 hours straight while you're going through this process or even missing something, you're
totally.
enabling a technology to be able to find this error.
It's more about assisting, right? Assisting the human being, and it can also train the a new fresh person off as well, right? Knowing this type of human reading, this type of scenario is very hard to train over time, right? This is easy to train a new, a fresh person coming into this type of role as well.
Yeah, and this could be anything from, did I assemble a product correctly in alignment to spec? Are the
Yeah,
labels on correctly? Are they in the right place? Are they readable labels? There's so
correct.
many ways that you can apply quality analysis that can allow your customers to get the right product.
Yeah, a lot of people claim, and think that we need devices to measure tolerances, right? We can actually do that with video. I mean, that's the easiest solution we can get. Again, right? It's not simple, but it's very, it's a quick, quick go to market.
Absolutely. So let's move this into a conversation on predictive maintenance. This has come up quite a bit in terms of companies trying to understand their supply chain and the manufacturing process that flows from it, and where predictive maintenance can come into play, both for operational savings on the manufacturing process, as well as on interruption of the manufacturing process, and maybe even integrating it into sold products to create new revenue.
Yeah, let's talk about this area. In this case, everything is related, right? The data is coming back again. In this case, right, you're looking at things like mercury switches or even accelerometers, right? That you're measuring certain vibrations on products and machinery. It doesn't have to be machinery, right? It can be anything. It can be human being. It can be any type of patterns that you're looking for. We're looking for essentially a known pattern or an unknown pattern in this case. And a lot of the times when you're looking at a predictive maintenance, right, you're looking at a known pattern. Like in this case, people have known what a heart rate is going to be on a person going through labor, right? Or people have known what a particular range of acceptable measurements are for melting a pot of steel, if you will, a batch of steel. Right? We know all of these things. We can put a known quantitative measurements and guidelines around it, and we can actually monitor these things and figure out, hey, are certain thresholds being met? If it is, or are there trends going to a particular threshold? If that's the case, we can actually quickly get alerted to the right situation, right? In this first scenario, you can actually alert somebody to go in there, make sure that the person in labor is actually proceeding well, or make sure that the furnace doesn't melt down, right? Those are huge risks that comes along with it, but we can also prevent these things to make sure that they are acting well. If we go to the next slide, right, we can also look at anomaly detection beyond the supervised methods I was telling you about earlier, right? If you just have raw data, I can actually even go look at the data and say, hey, if I see a particular, a vibration pattern, or if I see a particular person behaving a certain way, or if I see a particular, a movement, right? It doesn't have to be a device. It can be a market trend, right? It can be a sales trigger. It can be anything that's related, right? Including to temperatures, right? If I see certain things, is it related to something else? It could be triggered by some other item. In this case, right, we can actually say, hey, because human beings, can only take in so much data, right? And computers can take in a lot more. We can actually take in gobs and gobs of data through data lakes and so on and so forth, and we can actually figure out different patterns, which is called the unsupervised approach, and then we can actually enhance that data, like Brian was talking about, right? At the end of the day, though, it's not a one pass and done, right? It's actually take the data, learn from it, and then enhance on it to actually get better and better at these predictive, areas.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so let's go on to a conversation about cycle counting. A, first, what is cycle counting? And B, what are we doing with technology to be able to make it better?
So cycle counting is you create a cycle of going through your warehouse and re-verifying the inventory that your system thinks that is there. So as throughout the year, as something gets lost or damaged, or something just goes missing, flies away, in the manufacturing world, we go through and we just double check everything, and that's called the cycle counting program. So what we found an interesting use case around this was going through a warehouse and taking AI into the warehouse with us to help validate what we see and what we think is there. So for example, let's say I have a pallet of boxes and I need to count it. I can take a device like my phone and take a picture and have that picture analyzed and assess how many boxes are actually on there and get a confidence score on what I think, what I think I'm seeing. This way, an individual doesn't have to necessarily go through and count each individual item, but what we can do is verify it. That looks like 6, yep, I'm good. And instead of entering the data, we're just making a more efficient process. And this is possible through, custom vision AI through Microsoft to be able to do these object detections, and it really increases, the speed of the cycle counting process. This system that we're talking about, I used a Power App, which is actually running on my mobile phone. And you can kind of see down in the bottom corner there how all this stuff is integrated. Now, using a Power App is a great use of technology because it's low code, no code type of a build. So you can have citizen development that's helping with some of these processes.
What's interesting is if you were doing a cycle count in this scenario manually, not only are you counting them, but you're having to go up to each box and validate what's in them. You quickly got that just by taking a picture. You can see the lower right-hand corner.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got barcodes on all those boxes. So not only can I just identify that there were 6 boxes there, but I can actually identify specifically what's in them. And if there's a tag, a license plate on each one of the boxes, I can identify which unit is exactly where I thought it was. Now, in a warehouse scenario, you're going to have bins that are going to have, most bins would have a barcode around the location as well. So it really makes it much more efficient. And right now we're working with one of our clients to take this even to a next level, where we have drones that are going through a warehouse and actually capturing this rather than it being an individual.
It's interesting. It reminds me of the how many M&Ms are in the jar kind of contest. And some of our customers, I know you've told some stories around where they have it's like that. They have all these small items within a box or where in some kind of sort of container. And it's not quite as simple as the image that's here, but it accelerates that process of actually doing the cycle count.
Yeah, absolutely. And for this client, when we talked about this project, these boxes have a known quantity of the inventory, and that's how we actually translate that back into their ERP system.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Brian. All right, so let's wrap this up with an understanding of how this relates into customer insights and data. What we're finding is that many of our customers are in the process of growing and moving up a maturity curve in terms of their ability to use data to gain insights and to deliver value. Many companies are starting well down here with their ERP system or manual data exports that they're using to create scorecards and visualizations, or maybe they spent a fair amount of time creating a traditional data warehouse that they use to be able to analyze certain parts of data, but it's not fast enough to be able to deal with rapid IoT data that's tied to predictive analytics, or it's not useful enough for exploring because it's all built around this very slow ETL process. And what we're finding is that this is not only an opportunity for an organization to be able to gain real impact. These scenarios you're talking about, each of them are just really clear benefits to businesses and very achievable in terms of their near-term opportunity. These projects, they create an opportunity to be able to unite the relationship of a new modern data framework, so bringing data to the table in a usable way that can be explored quickly, usually using cloud data platforms, and then enabling that with machine learning and IoT to be able to provide the awareness, insight, and then output into the business that's very achievable. So this isn't like always lifting the entire data state. A lot of times it's going after a use case like the ones we talked about and using that as an opportunity to be able to position a data estate to be able to achieve that goal. So many of the capabilities that you see in the graphic before you, which is data sources right here, flowing into an ingest process, either in event hubs for high capacity, IoT data, or traditional sources into Data Factory, and then using that data in a data lake to be able to then position it for use cases such as stream analytics or cognitive services, which is what we used for doing a cycle counting, or for doing predictive analytics, or true machine learning workloads that are driving into applications that are inputting that back in for demand planning, or awareness within Power BI for analytics purposes. This really allows us to be able to have a very scalable data environment, one that doesn't have to lift all the data at once, and allows us to serve that as specific initial use case. So how do we get started? These are all things that are valuable. They're things that are exciting. How do we get moving? The way we find value for customers is by having a conversation, digging into the use case, finding the use case that has the most ROI, because ultimately the reason a company does this is because there's ROI attached to it. So we do that by having initial workshops around what's the best use case for the company, where's the best ROI, and then ultimately that maps into typically about a 50K pilot. And the goal of the pilot is to deliver real production output. This is not about just show me a tech understanding of how this works. It's about translate this idea around ROI into reality around ROI, and then map that into a full project implementation that operationalizes the ROI around the tech. And what we're finding is that if we start at the return and we find that there's value for the organization, then the investment in the project to deliver that ROI, as well as lift the data estate to a position where it's able to be serving not only this use case, but also other use cases, it delivers true value for an organization. So there's so much opportunity here, and we're really looking forward to having these conversations with you. So for next steps, let's meet one-on-one to talk about one or more of these scenarios. We can educate you further on how these happen, how they work, how we achieve value from them, and help us to learn more about you, learn more about your business process, where the opportunities exist to be able to drive return within your business, especially your manufacturing process or the products you're building. And then, of course, join us with the next webinar on Thursday, February 25th to talk about creating digital lines of business. And then find all the recordings of these videos and assets on our website. We will catch you next time. Do not forget to check what your follow-up item will be. We will love to have this follow-up conversation with you and explore how we can make this real within your business. Thank you to Brian and Lewin, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Nathan.